Good evening. I'm John Dittmer, and this is the Cybersecurity Studio. It is February 23rd, 2020. And tonight's topic is going to be risk management. The reason why it's important in the realm of cybersecurity is that a lot of times you have to make decisions based on scarce resources, constraints, policies, and you have to invoke a certain degree of risk management when it comes to your approach. Now, let's do a little bit of review before we go on. And essentially, let's start off with the definition of risk. Risk is the potential for uncontrollable loss of something of value. We had an equation in the last video where we talked about risk is essentially the likelihood of something happening to an asset that was of value to you times the impact or loss. So obviously, if you're in the business of protecting computers, networks, and the information and the operations, you have to take a degree of risk management. You have to figure out what you need to protect and what it takes you to get there under the optimal approach. Okay, because you're not going to be able to have 100% security all the time. And sometimes you have to have mitigation such as backup systems, fire control, fire suppression systems in your server room, redundant software, people thoroughly trained in incident handling procedures, things like that. Okay, so let's do a little bit of review from the last video. All right, what is risk? Risk is the potential for uncontrollable loss of something of value. And we had a mathematical equation which goes risk is equal to loss or impact times the likelihood of that happening. So let's keep that in mind. Okay? So, when it comes to risk management, you're trying to do is you are, and I'm taking this as a formal definition, is the identification, evaluation, and prioritization of risk, followed by the coordination and economical application of resources to manage, monitor, and control the probability of unfortunate events. Okay, what does that mean in basic English? Okay, in my last video I did the analogy of, okay, you go into work, there's some risk involved right there. You get in your car, or you jump on the metro, or take the train or the bus, whatever. Okay, well, let's choose a course of action like you drive to work. All right, well, some of the risk involved is like, you know that certain things could happen to your car, or what could either risk your safety, risk your passenger safety, damage something that you have inside the car, like maybe you bring your laptop to work or whatever, or just the car itself. You got a brand new car, you don't want to wreck it. So what are some risk management activities that you have? Well, first of all, you make sure it's in good operational condition. You make sure you follow the traffic laws, like snapping on your seatbelt, obey the traffic signs, obey the traffic lights. If there's an accident and the police or the fire department is directing traffic, you follow their orders, things like that. Okay? And so what happens if you have an accident? Okay, well now you're talking about mitigations. So you get a good car that has lots of safety devices. If you're like me, I tend to be in a mitigation mode where I keep an emergency road kit in the back of my car. Like, for example, I have flares, I have jumper cables, I have flashlights. So basically, if I'm stuck along the road, I can do something about it. Okay? So risk management is a lot like that. And if you so you're taking a look at, see what the risks are, what you can do about it. Okay? Now, there's a lot of documents and theories and stuff out there. I'm going to kind of use a formal definition by the National Institute of Science and Technology. For those who are not familiar with NIST, it's a U.S. government agency within the Department of Commerce. And their mission in life is to establish standards when it comes to science and technology. Okay? Because what happened was, back in the late 1800s, there was a big fire in Baltimore. And it was sort of like 9/11. Fire departments all around the region sent their fire trucks. They sent their firemen, and they were trying to fight the fire. Well, what happened was there wasn't any standardized fire plugs. So when they tried to screw in the hoses and try to get the water and to fight the fires, a lot of times they weren't successful. So people started realizing, especially this is like the middle of the industrial age, hey, we need to get some safety, we need to get some standards in there for safety and technology, because it's like, because it makes life a lot easier if there's a common approach to building a fire hydrant. And I should be able to take my fire truck from Woodbridge, Virginia, where I live, to Fairfax, Virginia, or Washington, D.C., or Baltimore, and put a fire hose into a fire hydrant and get it to work. Because a lot of times you don't know where you might need it. Same thing is true with cybersecurity. So you have standardized procedures, standardized processes, and so on. Okay, so let's go back to NIST. The NIST has an organization within itself referred to as the Computer Security Resource Center. They got a lot of good folks in there, and they try to come up with national standards in their approach to cybersecurity. Okay, and because part of the problem has been is that throughout the years, the Army had a policy, the Navy had the policy, the FBI had a different policy, and all these different procedures. And so what's happened now is that in the last couple of decades, people have wisened up. It's like, hey, the government has to operate together and has to work with industry in a lot of cases, or academia. And we need to have this cybersecurity standardized. We have to have standards in how we approach things. And so what they did was they came up with special publications. Most famous within cybersecurity is referred to as the 800 series of special publications. Take a look at it at their website, because it's actually very good reading. Because what's happening more and more is that is becoming the authoritative set of standards for the federal government. Okay? So there is no longer just a Navy way of cybersecurity. There isn't just an Army way of cybersecurity or Homeland Security way of cybersecurity. A lot of their policies are based on national publications such as the NIST series 800. And one of these publications is the NIST Special Pub 800-30, which is known as the risk management framework. Do not confuse that with the risk management framework we'll talk about later. But essentially, it creates a standardization of how you approach risk management when it comes to cybersecurity within the federal government. And so they have a series of mitigation activities that when it comes to the approach to risk management. And let's take a look at some of those steps. Okay, when it comes to risk management options, the first one is risk assumption. To accept the potential risk and continue operating your IT system to implement controls to lower the risk at an acceptable level. Now, the truth is that's going to be at the end of the day after you make sure your system is about as secure as possible. And I will tell you right now, okay, you might have smart people, you might have great software, great hardware, but you're never going to be 100% secure. Okay, and the reason for that is that we don't know all the possible vulnerabilities of these systems, and very much like the arms race during the Cold War, or even now, okay, some hacker someplace is trying to break some piece of your piece of software out there, and then what happens is that somebody will come up with a countermeasure, and then they'll try to figure a way around that. And then the security bubblers will come up with another countermeasure to counter that. And it just keep on going. So the best approach is, okay, what is the optimal and most economic way of securing my system? And that is a lot of what risk management is about. Okay? Now, another strategy when it comes to risk management mitigation is risk avoidance. Of course, you make sure you have good software, make sure you don't, you have properly cleared people operating your system. So you set up what is called controls. Okay, and controls say, okay, here's the controls that affect your processes or affect how you do things. And like, for example, you run a scan on a regular basis to make sure that all your software is properly patched and there's no rogue systems on your network, like devices that were put in 5 years ago and nobody's maintaining. Things like that. That's all part of risk avoidance. The next thing is risk limitation. You limit the risk by implementing your controls that minimize the reverse impact of the exercises of vulnerability. It could be supporting, it could be preventive, detective controls. Like, for example, you might have a passive scanning system that compares the software from today, from yesterday to today. And it might point out, hey, there's a new piece of software on here. Is this what you wanted, boss? Kind of thing. So, that way you kind of limit your risk because you know that, hey, this was just put on yesterday. So you do some research and figure out what's going on. Okay, risk planning. Okay, is to manage risk by developing a risk management plan that prioritizes, implements, and maintains your controls. Okay, so you kind of do that early in your developing your system. You do some risk planning, and then also too, it's sort of like throughout the life cycle of your system, you do various types of planning. Like when you're trying to develop your system, you kind of plan, what are my security controls? You want to bake that into the life cycle of your system, as opposed to bolting it on later on, and then you have to it'll cost you a lot more money to do it. So in my later videos, I'm talking about baking in. That means you're putting in your security controls early on in the development of the system, as opposed to slapping them on after you find out some big risk or someone has hacked into your system, and then you got to fix it, because that gets to be very expensive. Trust me. Okay. And then another part of security mitigation is research acknowledgement. You lower your resources, you lower your risk of loss by changing the vulnerability or flaw in researching controls to correct that vulnerability. And sometimes when you say correct the vulnerability, that gets into the arena of remediating. Okay, you want to get rid of that vulnerability, keep your system safe. Yes. Okay, and another mitigation strategy, as you take a look, is that sometimes you transfer that risk transference. And a lot of times, what you're doing is you're picking options to compensate for the loss, such as buying insurance. And you see that a lot in the commercial world, because if there is a data loss or a data breach, it gets to be very expensive. So one approach that a lot of agencies and companies do is that they have insurance in cases of data loss. Now, insurance companies have been in the risk management business for a very long time. Any successful insurance company understands these concepts. And one of the things they're going to do is, part of the policy is that they're going to say, you must have these controls in place in order to get a payout, okay? We want you scanning your systems. We want you to make sure that you have these controls in place, because we're not just going to give you millions of dollars if you keep losing your data over and over again, okay? Because that's how they go broke and out of business. Remember, insurance companies are in the business to collect more in premiums than they give out in payouts. So the smart companies are going to do is say, okay, we'll insure your data, but you gotta follow our procedures, and here's your standards that you've got to follow. Okay, so hope that's easy to understand. All right. So again, Risk management is an essential part of cybersecurity because, let's face it, you're dealing with a lot of constraints out there. Especially me as a contractor, I go to an agency or a company and I don't get to choose sometimes what software that I use. It's already been in place for sometimes years. Okay, a lot of times what they're doing is they might be doing some changes to the system, or they might put in some new capabilities and they want me to check it out or help me do it. Like right now I'm working on a mitigation where I'm helping a government agency go from a government cloud to a commercial cloud, and making sure that that is done safely and done appropriately. Okay, and that's part of risk management too. So you see it over and over again. So, so like I say, another good place if you want to learn the basics of risk management, refer to the NIST Special Pub 800-30. This has a website that you can find all their publications easily, and they even show you draft ones so you can make public comments about it. And it's a pretty good resource, especially for those entering into the field. I highly suggest you take a look at it. Well, anyhow, if you want to support my efforts and make better and more informative videos, please contribute to my Patreon account, and I would appreciate it very much. And if you do, I'll give you a shout out in my upcoming videos. All right, take care, be safe, and I look forward to seeing you back here at the Cybersecurity Studio. Have a good night.